Good morning, welcome to Sky News Breakfast. Boris Johnson is facing calls to cut the self-isolation period for people who test positive for COVID to just 5 days to protect the NHS and the economy. Under current rules in England, people need to isolate for a week, but with NHS staff absences on the rise, experts say cutting the self-isolation period could prevent essential services from collapsing. Meanwhile, hundreds of thousands of people will be contacted again this week and urged to book a booster and have what the health service is calling a jabby new year. Let's speak to our political correspondent Joe Pike, who's in Westminster. Good morning, Joe. So how likely is it that they are going to cut the isolation period to 5 days? And if they do, when would it happen?
I think it is, Kimberly, increasingly likely that this will happen because so many medical and scientific experts are recommending it, although not the JCVI quite yet. They are the key body that would press the government, suggest to the government that they should change the policy. It would also make sense for the government to announce it before the new year. Of course, the challenge at the moment is we are seeing a very high case rate, a record number in England yesterday, 117,000. That would therefore suggest there will also be record numbers of people in self-isolation. One recent estimate suggests around 800,000 people could be self-isolating in the UK. Now, the effects of that on the economy and on different public services is maybe slightly muted now because of the Christmas break. It's not affecting schools, it's not affecting some businesses. Commuting is not at the height we'd expect next week, but that could obviously change. We could see staff shortages in train companies, in schools. What will that mean for pupils? Well, some need to be taught at home. The key concern, of course, though, is, as ever, the NHS for the government. They are now slightly calmer about how Omicron will affect hospitalisations. We're certainly not seeing the critical care surge we saw in January and February. And one body, NHS Providers, which represents clinical commissioning groups and NHS trusts, says that their bigger concern is not actually Omicron's effect on hospitalisations, but Omicron's effect on staffing and self-isolation. That could be a bigger problem. The NHS not able to deliver the services it currently does because of staff shortages. This is the view of the Health Minister, Gillian Keegan.
We very recently went from 10 days to 7 days. So today, if you test negative on day 6 and day 7, then your isolation period will end. So that's what we've done for now. And of course, we'll await, if JCVI want to give us further advice on that, then we'll await their advice.
As Gillian Keegan was saying there, it was just a week ago that the UK government's advice moved from 10 days self-isolation to just 7, as long as you take a lateral flow test on day 6 and on day 7 and you test negative. In the US, though, that self-isolation period, if you test positive for COVID, is now just 5 days. And some within the health service in this country say we should start treating this as a common cold. We shouldn't see the economy grind to a halt just because people get this virus, especially as some people are getting it asymptomatically or with very few symptoms. So, Kimberly, I think it's increasingly likely we will see a change, and it would make sense for that change to happen pretty fast.
OK, Joe, thanks a lot. Well, let's have a look at the latest COVID-19 data now, and there have been 129,471 new cases of COVID-19 recorded in the UK in the latest 24-hour period. More than 117,000 of those were in England. That's the highest number of cases reported in England since the start of the pandemic. However, those numbers do not include data for Scotland and Northern Ireland. But there is data for Wales, which also includes figures from Christmas Day and Boxing Day. Another 18 deaths have been reported within 28 days of a positive test, and that brings the total number of people who've died in the UK to 148,021. Well, 16,357 people have received their first dose of a vaccine and 18,965 have had their second now. It means in total, nearly 47.3 million people have received their second dose. Well, meanwhile, 215,703 new boosters or third jabs were reported in the latest 24-hour period. Nearly 32.7 million people have now had their third jab or their booster. Well, in Europe, Omicron's surge across the continent is forcing countries into tighter restrictions. France reported Europe's highest ever number of new daily COVID cases, recording 179,807 cases on Tuesday. However, the figures could be due in part to reporting delays over Christmas. Earlier this week, French health authorities did warn that the country could see as many as 250,000 cases a day by the start of January. The Omicron variant has also led to record high cases in Italy, Greece and Portugal. The former Children's Commissioner for England says the social care system is not fit for purpose and frequently places young people in greater danger. Anne Longfield's Commission on Young Lives report suggests the system is guilty of handing some children over to criminal gangs. Together with the Oasis Charitable Trust, they're calling on the government to establish a ministerial task force aimed at financing new community homes for children. Sky's Jared Tubb reports.
Yeah, I'm actually staying at my birth parents' house currently.
Rachel has been through the care system in England, which a new report says is unfit for purpose. She says she saw increasing numbers of older teenagers coming into care, not getting enough support and turning to crime.
I almost found myself almost joining them because it was like, well, if all the foster children are doing this, let's just be the stereotype. But obviously at that point I was trying to still go to university, so I prevented myself. But a lot of young people fall into that trap just because it is a stereotype and there's not that support, so what else can they actually do?
The care system in England is said to be facing an ongoing epidemic of drug running, grooming and serious youth violence. The claims are made in a charity-funded report that says in March this year there were 80,850 children in care in England, up 1% from last year. 23% of them were 16 and 17-year-olds with acute needs. In London alone, there were at least 1,932 children in care living in unregulated, semi-independent accommodation. The report highlights older teenagers being put in care to safeguard them from county lines and criminal exploitation, only to end up at risk of more serious harm. It says the care system is infuriatingly inadequate and was designed with younger children in mind.
We are seeing a children's social care system which is stretched to its limits and creaking. There is a children's social care review going on, an independent review, and we would like that review to put teenagers very high on its list of recommendations when it reports early in 2022. It's completely unsustainable, either on moral grounds or economic grounds, which is why it needs to be reset much more towards helping children before they get into crisis.
The report shows particular concern for racial bias that it says puts black boys at particular risk of harm. Black children are more likely to be in care, but the number who were adopted dropped by 50% between 2015 and 2019. The report calls for a new care system geared to help vulnerable teenagers. Rachel says she was one of the lucky ones and supports the report's conclusion that the current system is failing to give teenagers the help they need. Gerard Tubb, Sky News, Oldham.
There's a warning today that millions of families are facing a cost of living catastrophe in 2022 due to soaring energy bills and rising taxes. Emma Birchley joins us now from the newsroom. Morning, Emma. Tell us a bit more about this report.
Yeah, it's a pretty bleak warning that comes from the economics think tank, the Resolution Foundation, that predicts that 2022 will be the year of the squeeze, and certainly many families will be feeling that already. They say that inflation come the spring could have hit 6%, which would be the highest it's been since 1992. And it's really a perfect storm that's going to kick in come April of two things, and that is soaring energy prices, but also tax rises. So if we first off look at energy price rises, come April, the energy price cap will be increased. And for the typical family, that's expected to cost about £500. And then when taxes, the national national insurance contributions will increase by 1.25%. Income tax thresholds have been frozen. And altogether, this is expected to amount to around £1,200 for the typical family. Now, the government says they've taken decisive action to try to help. They have put in measures worth £4.2 billion. They say the energy price cap is protecting people from the real soaring costs of wholesale energy. And on top of that, they have also increased the point at which universal credit is reduced. However, the fact is that Resolution Foundation says that the government needs to do more and the priority should be tackling these energy price rises.
OK, Emma, thank you very much. Well, joining me now is the Shadow Work and Pension Secretary, Jonathan Ashworth. Mr Ashworth, good morning to you. Thanks a lot for talking to us. £1,200 extra a year, that's a lot of money.
Huge amount of money. Working people, families, pensioners are facing a devastating cost of living crisis. It's because we've had 11 years of Tory economic failure. We've now got this low growth, high tax economy. And what it means for families and pensioners and working people is that the heating bills are going through the roof. The prices in the shops are going up because we've got inflation back, which also risks eroding savings and pensions. And of course, we've got these punishing tax rises on the way, and wages are stagnating. And of course, there's things like the universal credit being cut, which means families are struggling to make ends meet. Even when they're working all hours God sends, they're still in poverty. So this is a crisis. We need action from ministers like cutting VAT on fuel. Unless we get that action, working people, families, pensioners are going to have a very difficult year, really squeezed. They're going to be worse off.
Well, the government would probably argue that it's because of 2 years of a pandemic and the rising energy costs that they have just no control over.
Well, it's Rishi Sunak and Boris Johnson who are imposing that big tax rise this April on working people, alongside other taxes going up, like council tax. It's Rishi Sunak and Boris Johnson who have cut the universal credit for millions of families who have Boris Johnson has vanished. He's doing nothing to tackle the rising energy costs. So there is a different way to this. Don't go ahead with that tax rise. Let's get rid of the VAT on our heating bills. Let's have a proper national living wage. There are things you can do to make people better off.
But they'd argue that the tax rises are because of the situation in which we find ourselves, that they have no control over. And they'd argue that they are protecting people from those rising energy costs with the energy price cap.
Look, people, as this think tank report has shown today, people are going to be paying hundreds and hundreds of pounds extra in energy bills. And Boris Johnson is nowhere to be seen. He's not getting a grip of this crisis. He could take VAT off the energy bills. That would cushion this for many, many families. In fact, you're going to have families worse off. You're going to have pensioners who are now facing the prospect of shivering in the cold or going without hot meals because of these rising energy bills.
But the price cap is protecting people.
The people are still going to be paying hundreds of pounds more. That's what the think tank report today is demonstrating. And we're suggesting, like other European countries are doing, take the tax, take the VAT off those fuel bills to get us through this crisis, and do other things like not going ahead with a punishing tax rise this April. Pay people a proper national living wage, because otherwise this is going to be a year of squeeze. This is a devastating cost of living crisis for families, working people and pensioners, and Boris Johnson is nowhere to be seen on this. He cannot abdicate his responsibilities to ordinary working people in the way he is doing. It's just not on.
Let's talk about COVID now and this issue of the isolation period. It was 10 days, it's been cut to 7, and there are calls now, pressure on the PM to cut it to 5. What do you think about that?
Well, look, I think we should always follow the advice of our leading scientists, medical scientists like the Chris Whitty and Patrick Vallance, and I don't think they've given an opinion on this. The only thing I would say is, and I was listening to Chris Hobson, who represents NHS chief executives last night, who was just raising a question with respect to NHS staff. And we know the NHS is under huge pressure because they haven't got enough staff. I mean, we went into the crisis short of 100,000 staff, short of 40,000 nurses in the NHS. He just made the point that, look, NHS staff are looking after some of the most vulnerable people in society, whether that's people who themselves have COVID, or whether that's patients in mental health inpatient units, or even people in community care settings. They're looking after very vulnerable people, and their duty is to protect those people. So he just raised a question about this 5-day suggestion, but I think we should be led by our scientific leaders, by Chris Whitty and Patrick Vallance. They are world-leading scientists. Let's see what they say on this before rushing into this.
So do you think if the JCVI, if the chief scientific advisors say, yes, go ahead with the 5-day, as they have done in the US, 5-day isolation period, do you think it should go ahead?
Well, I'm not a medical scientist, so I would always bow to their judgment in these situations. So let's wait and see what they have to say about it. I mean, as always with these things, there's different opinions. So us politicians should always be careful to listen to scientific experts.
Do you think we should have had tighter restrictions before Christmas, before New Year?
But we said nobody wanted to see restrictions. I think what we're seeing with this new variant is that if you get the booster and you are vaccinated, it gives you a level of protection against it. And I think the question for me is, why are there still around 5 million people who are not vaccinated? And what are the government going to do to get to those 5 million people? Should they be going door to door, for example? Should we be getting GPs like we've actually had here in Leicester, ringing them up directly, asking them to come in for their vaccine? I think if we've got to go further on vaccination to give our society greater protection, because we know that a huge numbers of people in hospital, sadly, with the new variant, or indeed with COVID anyway, are people who are not even vaccinated. And I think we need a big national effort now to find those missing 5 million and persuade them to take the jab.
OK, Mr. Ashworth, thank you so much for talking to us.
Pleasure.
Let's have a look at some other stories making the news this morning. And Prince Andrew's lawyers have challenged his sexual abuse accuser's residency status in a bid to have her civil case against him thrown out of court. The Duke of York's team have filed a motion that states Virginia Giuffre is not a US citizen, as she lives in Perth in Australia, and therefore the New York court doesn't have jurisdiction over the case. Ms. Giuffre is suing Prince Andrew for allegedly sexually assaulting her when she was a teenager, claims that he strenuously denies. More than £4 million of taxpayers' money was spent policing Insulate Britain's road blocking protests this year. That's according to a new investigation. The Transport Secretary, Grant Shapps, said he was appalled by the bill, which was disclosed by police forces in response to Freedom of Information requests. The legendary American football coach and commentator John Madden has died at the age of 85. The NFL said he died unexpectedly, but didn't give a cause. Madden led the Oakland Raiders to their first Super Bowl in the 1976 season and became a hugely popular TV analyst after retiring from coaching. And NFL video games have borne his name since 1988. Now, the parents of a teenager who was shot and killed by a stray bullet fired by police in Los Angeles have spoken of their pain at opening her Christmas presents without her. Body camera footage shows the moment police officers fired at a man who was attacking people in a shopping centre. Valentina Orellana Peralta was hiding in a changing room when a bullet hit her through a wall. A warning, this report from Lisa Holland shows the moments before and after the shooting.
America is used to tragic shootings, but the family of Valentina Orellana Peralta say they are in disbelief that a shopping trip to buy clothes for Christmas could have ended like this. The 14-year-old was with her mother Soledad, who described through a translator how they were tragically caught up in a police operation to stop an attacker in a Los Angeles department store.
She died in my arms, and there was nothing I could do. To see a son or daughter die in your arms is one of the pains, the greatest pains and most profound pains that any human being can imagine.
Get distance. Hey, back up. We have a victim down. Victim down.
Police body cameras show officers attending the store the day before Christmas Eve.
Hey, back up. Get out. Hold on. He's got a two. You got it? You got it? Yeah. I know. Okay. Word. He's hitting right on the right-hand side.
A man, later identified as Daniel Ilana Lopez, is seen attacking several female customers with his bike lock.
Hey, she's bleeding. She's bleeding.
Police shoot dead the attacker. But one of their bullets pierces a changing room wall, killing 14-year-old Valentina with a gunshot wound to the chest. Valentina's family say they came to Los Angeles to escape violence in Chile. Her father showed reporters a Christmas present she never received. Through their lawyer, he spoke of his devastation.
It is like my whole heart has been ripped out of my body. The pain of opening the Christmas presents for her that had been delivered for Christmas Day cannot be articulated. My daughter was special. She had dreams. And tragically, those dreams have been overshadowed by this nightmare that prevents me from sleeping at night.
Valentina's parents say they have unanswered questions about the way their daughter died.
Valentina's life matters!
Police shootings in Los Angeles have more than doubled over the last 12 months. The California Department of Justice says it's now investigating. Lisa Holland, Sky News.
Let's have a quick look at the weather.
Look forward to brighter skies. The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
We're in for an unsettled week with more wind and rain, but it is going to turn very mild. Northern and eastern Britain are frosty with some dense fog patches, while Ireland, Northern Ireland and the southwest are mild, wet and windy. Rain there will clear during the morning with sunny spells developing, while northern and eastern England and much of Scotland will turn wet. Some heavy rain is likely over western hills, while strengthening winds in the south and west will bring gales to northwestern coasts. It is going to be mild generally, chilly in the far north. Northern Scotland will turn wet and very windy later, but the strong winds and rain will become largely confined to the Northern Isles.
The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
So 2021 has been a bumper year in the world of tech, with everything from foldable phones and cryptocurrencies to LFTs and virtual reality becoming more important than ever in today's world. Joining me now with a review of what's happened and what could be coming next year is the global editor-in-chief of Tech Radar, Gareth Beavis. Gareth, good morning to you. So, where do we even start?
Well, it has been a very big year for tech, not least because of the fact the pandemic is still obviously going on and people are still struggling to know exactly what to buy, when to buy and where to buy it. But I think the big headline has really been virtual reality, and it's been a bit of a stealth one because I think most people have been waiting for virtual reality to hit a tipping point where everyone starts using one. There's a headset in every single lounge across the country. And it's not quite there yet, but there's really getting to a tipping point where the Oculus Quest 2, for instance, a headset that's come from Facebook, is really starting to make waves. And people are really enjoying the world of virtual reality in new ways.
Do you think that we will see a time when there are headsets in every house?
Well, and this is what's exciting because yes is the answer, and it won't just be every house. It will be things that we wear on the streets. But I've been doing this job a long time, and you will start predicting something 10 years ago, and then you see what actually comes out. It's a slightly watered down version of it, and it's less exciting, but it does proliferate through our society. And so I think that in 2022, if and when Apple does launch Apple glasses, which are heavily rumoured, that will change the game. We've been saying that for a few years, but the idea is that this technology really needs to work and to be useful and not just a gimmick. And I feel like we're getting to the point now where technology is giving us the capability to have more lens technology that can sense where our hands are in real space, which using things like LiDAR, which would mean that actually works. That I think when that tipping point comes, we will start to really enjoy what new things can happen.
So what would Apple Glass do?
Well, this is the thing. The idea would be simplicity, basically. You don't want to go straight away with tens of thousands of different things in front of you. Facebook's doing the metaverse, trying to make things like Horizon Worlds, where there's just quite a lot of information just thrown at you in one sec. So what Apple really needs to do is to make sure that there's information that's just useful. So if you happen to be nearby something that it knows a notification will be popping up for, that would come up and hopefully quite discreetly. And like I said, using the lasers and LiDAR technology, it would be able to see where your hands are in real time. So you could interact with these different interfaces without having to tap the side of your glasses or to do scrolling and do things that are quite cumbersome. That's the difference, and that's what's going to make the game-changing moves.
Let's talk about gimmicks and foldable phones. Do you think they're gimmicks or are they going to stay?
They're absolutely going to stay, and they are very much not a gimmick. The issue is right now is that people like Samsung are going very hard and trying to make them mainstream. We saw the Galaxy Fold 2, which was an excellent phone. It was very thick. It folded out that way. It took it was basically very heavy. It wasn't the most sleek device that you could slip into your pocket. Now, the reason for this is that the companies, every phone company loves battery space. It loves being able to stick a huge battery in as much as possible so it doesn't have to worry about charging all the time. And that's what Samsung did with the Galaxy Fold. But what we're starting to see now is a acceleration towards miniaturization, things like waterproofing, styluses being added into the Galaxy Fold 3. Clamshell designs are becoming important, so not just folding things out, but things that you can snap shut, and they're much more useful for just slipping in the pocket. Those are coming. And I've been tracking foldable devices for 15 years. And I saw some startups in Eindhoven back in the early 2000s, and they were doing great things in terms of being able to roll out displays and fold them out. And half the problem is just making sure that people are ready for them, because there's a worry that they're more fragile, they're not going to work as well. And while there's a lot to do with technology, making these displays last for a long time, again, making them less heavy, they are very exciting. They're going to open up a whole world of possibilities, and hopefully 2022 is going to see some real advances there.
Well, none of it's going to work, is it, if we don't have any chips? And that continues to be a problem.
It really does, and it's really dull, unfortunately. It's not one of those things that you want to talk about, because you want to talk about the things that they can do. But absolutely, the chip shortages are one of the most annoying headlines of 2021. And the reason for these are myriad. There's the fact there's been weather issues in Japan and in America that, of course, caused slowdowns. I mean, the pandemic absolutely had a huge effect on it. We're thinking single-digit % growth for the semiconductor industry, which is the industry that makes these chips. We're expecting that to be, if it's single-digit in 2020, but that was triple-digit, nearly 30% of demand. So that absolutely completely changed everything. And now every single auto industry needs a chip. Cars, they can't make as many cars, and they're having to slow down because there aren't the chips to put in there. The PS5, you can't get those because you can't get as many chips. Graphics cards, there's so many things. And even the smaller industries that rely on these, they just can't get them because bigger orders and bigger customers that need them in greater volumes. And so while there are huge moves being made to try and speed this up, and across the world, and opening more foundries, not just in Asia, to try and spread the load, they're 2 or 3 years away. So we're going to be here for a little while.
Oh, that's a bit depressing. But Gareth, thanks a lot. Thanks anyway. Have a good day.
You too.
Bye. Now, campaigners say thousands of offenders are still serving indefinite sentences, despite the fact they were abolished almost a decade ago. The jail terms, called imprisonment for public protection sentences, were handed down when a court believed an offender was a danger to the public, so no date was set for their release. Sky's Aisha Zahid reports.
At 26, John was sentenced to a minimum of 5 years in prison for armed robbery. But more than a decade later, Marie has been forced to face another Christmas without her son.
As far as I'm concerned, John isn't dangerous. He's traumatised and there's no support. He phoned me up one Christmas and he said to me, "Mum, I can't do it anymore. I'm on a hunger strike." So I'm saying, "Look, John, that ain't going to help. You need to keep your strength up. You need to eat." So everybody, the family, no one could eat our Christmas dinner. That was done. We're all crying. John's crying down the phone on many occasions. I live in fear that I'm going to get the phone call, "He's died."
John was given an indeterminate imprisonment for public protection sentence, or IPP, in 2005. He was initially released after serving 9 years, but has been recalled twice since, meaning he served a decade over his original tariff. IPPs were rolled out for offenders considered to be a serious threat. Introduced in 2005, they were later abolished in 2012, but there was no retrospective change for those who had already been sentenced. Over 8,700 IPPs were issued, and more than 1,700 of those prisoners are still incarcerated. The mental health crisis among these prisoners is rife.
IPP sentences have led to a sense of hopelessness, and have been traumatic and in many instances toxic to the mental health of prisoners, and resulting in serious self-harm and deaths.
So far, 70 IPP prisoners have taken their own life. Tommy Nichol is one of them.
My brother wouldn't be dead today if he hadn't been given an IPP sentence. I have absolutely no doubt in my mind about that. He said it himself.
Donna is campaigning for change.
The government has spent 10 years trying for the MOJ to try and fix this. And they've tried, but we still have a massive problem. The only way to fix this is through resentencing. And if they don't resentence, there needs to be political change around the licence conditions.
In a statement, the Ministry of Justice said, "We are helping those still in custody progress towards release. But as a judge deemed them to be a high risk to the public, the Independent Parole Board must decide if they are safe to leave prison." Marie so desperately wants to see her son back, but the wait feels endless. She fears it could be many more years before they're reunited. Aisha Zahid, Sky News.
And anyone who's been affected by that report or is emotionally distressed can contact the Samaritans for support. That's on 116123 or on email, just email joe@samaritans.org. Hello again, you're watching Sky News Breakfast. We're going to have a look at the papers now. Journalist and author Yasmin Alibai-Brown and sociologist Ashley Frawley are with us to do that. Hello again to you both. Yasmin, let's start with you and look at the inside of the Mail. Who is saying we're over the worst of COVID?
Well, I remain very cautious, and I fear that this double spread is wishful thinking. I think, what do they call it? Confirmation bias. That a lot of stuff is said here. A leading expert says days of mass fatalities are history. Well, yes, as Ashley said in the last review we did earlier, people aren't on ventilators. We aren't seeing the horrific scenes we used to see with the first terrible crisis that erupted. But, you know, I do not believe that we're in the sunny meadows again. And some of the quotes here, for example, Sir John Bell, who's a senior scientist, says very cautiously, it is likely this will be less severe and we will probably be fine. Probably, cautious talk. One of the things that worries me about this, that people who are already not masking and not being vaccinated will now think it's over. And infection rates are rising. So I'm extremely cautious. But this is what the Mail is kind of almost celebrating.
Ashley, what do you think? Do you think that we should be cautiously optimistic, or do you think we should wait for the data?
Well, I think some of the data is coming in now, and there are reasons for cautious optimism. I disagree that this means that people will throw caution to the wind. In fact, some of the reasons why the case numbers might have fallen slightly around Christmas is because people were probably being very, very careful on the lead up to Christmas, knowing that they're going to meet with family members and so on, and perhaps meet with older people. I think people are at a point now where they know and they are able to make judgments on the basis of the information available. I think we should trust people to do that. And I also think we should avoid COVID tunnel vision too. I mean, yes, we do have to be cautious, but there are other things in society that need to be worried about as well.
Let's go to the front of the Times, because this is also following on from that. The Prime Minister being urged to cut the isolation time. It was 10 days, it's gone down to 7 days in the past week. And now they're saying it should be cut to 5 days. Obviously, the US have just done that. Ashley, do you think it should happen, and do you think it will happen here? Ashley?
Well, this would be a risky move. But at this point, as I was saying, we need to be wary that our actions to fight the disease aren't worse than the disease itself. And this is particularly true when it comes to healthcare workers who, as another report in the papers today has said, are dropping like flies. And by that, they mean are testing positive and then going out of work. And it's based on, it would be reducing the quarantine time to 5 days would be following on from the United States. where the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention have recommended that it be dropped to 5 days because of evidence that they say shows transmission is most likely to happen within those 5 days, 2 before developing symptoms and 3 afterward. And also, a lot of cases are asymptomatic. So the idea is if you are testing negative and you are no longer showing symptoms, you should be able to come out of quarantine earlier. I think 5 days is probably a little bit risky, but the idea of looking at the evidence and thinking seriously about reducing that time is really important, because the knock-on effects of quarantine are going to get much worse than the disease as time goes on and more of the population is vaccinated.
Yasmin, what do you think? Do you think we're going to see it cut to 5 days?
Well, I'm not sure. I think the way we make decisions about the National Health Service workers, it seems to me extraordinarily uncaring. They are exhausted. They are falling like flies. And I think we should ask them whether 5 days quarantine or rest, as it would be in their case, is really good enough for them to come back to work. And the other thing I do disagree about with Ashley is that people are sensible and they know how to take care of themselves. You go on to the London Underground. They did agreed over Christmas because they wanted Christmas. You go on the London Underground, the number of unmasked people is horrendous compared to other places. Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland are taking a more cautious approach. And on New Year's Eve, you will see a breakdown of all caution. So I want to see what the figures are like after that rave that is going to happen, uncontrolled, I think. On the 31st.
Well, the figures in Scotland and Wales aren't exactly encouraging. You know, I think there's a lot of moralization going on that's starting to depart a little bit from the evidence of what's actually going on in the world. I think COVID has started to stand for those people who don't do the right thing, and as opposed to us, good people who are careful.
I'm sorry, they don't wear masks. That is a bad thing. They don't get vaccinated. Some of them can't. I accept that. But look, don't tell me it's moralizing. I'm talking about the health of the nation. I think that's really quite rude to say it's a moralizing. You know, I am not moralizing.
It is. I'm sorry, but I'm sorry if that sounds rude to you, but it is. It has become. If you look at the political comics, for example, of the unvaccinated, there are obese people wearing red caps and eating something. This is something that I've noticed, and it's come to stand for those hordes of possibly Trump voters, or even in the UK, you see this with people with red caps. Why? They're wearing red. They're a 40-something-year-old man. It has become a proxy for talking about the other, those people who are a threat to the rest of the nation. And I don't think that's actually the case. If you look at people who are unvaccinated, they are not, they tend to be ethnic minorities. They tend to be people who are a bit poorer. They're not this like boogeyman of the white working class or the Trump voter or something like that. But that's what it's become. It has become a symbol of morality, and being a good, upstanding person is against those people.
Okay, I think this is obviously something we all have to discuss, and we're going to move on now because we're running out of time. But Yasmin, just talk us through this social care system report that's really troubling. It's in the Eye in a lot of the papers, but you've picked it out in the Eye.
Yes, this is quite interesting and very worrying. That a report on young people's lives has come out with some really shocking evidence that. And they've actually said that our social care system is not fit for purpose, that a lot of young people in care are moved from house to house, from area to area, often away from where their support networks are, multiple placements, away, their social workers change, and they become exposed at that, with all this movement and insecurity, they become very vulnerable and attracted to, and actually probably groomed by criminal gangs. And so, this report is very worrying and needs to be taken seriously, that, these children who are already so failed by families and the system are now ending up as career criminals.